All right, so if you need to study for your test, I'm going to start with the test review. So you may or may not have done the test review. If not, get that on out and we're going to do that. I'm going to start, I'll start here. So remember, for a two-step inequality, you can always box that variable term. Remember we do that last, right? And so that 4 is being added, right? It's a positive 4. And so the opposite of adding is subtracting, so we would subtract. And we've got some things to pay attention to. I'm going to drop this over here. And I'm going to drop my inequality, and I don't need to flip it because I did not multiply or divide by a negative. And here I've got different signs differ, and my negative is bigger, so we've got -2. Okay, and then I'm multiplying by 3 because the 3 is dividing. I'm going to multiply by 3, and I did not multiply by a negative number, so I don't flip my inequality. Okay, and a negative, when we multiply and divide, remember that's when we use that triangle. We multiply and divide, so a negative number times a positive number gives me a negative answer. All right, and then we're going to graph this number. So we've got 0 here, we've got a -6 over on this side, and we've got a +6, right? And so I want to compare, I want to shade any number that x can be. And so since it's not equal to, I'm not including -6 as an answer. So I'm going to have an open circle in front of that, meaning -6 is not greater than -6. This is not a true statement, so -6 is not an answer. Okay, so I want to choose x is greater than -6, any number greater than -6. Well, we know all positives are greater than -6, so all of those numbers can be x. So that's the way we're shading to the right. Okay, and for a missing side length, remember if we want to find the length of something, we're going to use Pythagoras' Pythagorean theorem. A squared plus b squared equals c squared. The first thing is, do we have c or are we looking for c? We have it, right? And so remember that these two squares add up to c, right? So we need to take these two and subtract. So we will not be adding, these will be subtracting. If that's c, then we can make that one b. So b squared equals 17 squared. So a squared, oops, that's supposed to be 8. Sorry, I plugged in b for 8. 8 squared is not 8 times 2, but 8 times 8, which is 64. And 17 times 17, make sure you know how to do that because you'll definitely be challenged with something like this on a test, is 289. Okay, we're going to subtract 64. Like I said, since we are looking for the missing side length that adds up to this, you could even think of it like an equation. You're solving for this, and so the 64 is being added, so we subtract it to both sides. So 225, a squared equals. Okay, so if you leave your answer as a squared equals 225, then you're going to miss a point because it's not finished. I need to find the square root. And if I square root one side, then I square root the other. Because remember what cancels out a square? Square rooting it. And don't say divide by 2. Okay, the opposite of dividing is multiplication. All right, so a equals 15. Okay, so the side length is 15. And you can check to make sure that this is smaller than 17, and it is. So we're probably correct. All right, so down here, this looks just like something that's going to be on your test. Remember all of these values. It's always going to be x and y. All of these values represent x. And so remember, if I know what x is, what do? I plug it in. I plug it in for x. So when I write this, y equals -x plus 3. I don't want to write an x because I know what x is. Okay, it's -2. Okay, y equals negative, not x, but -1 plus 3. What I'm finding is when students are not writing this out, they're making errors. Okay, I'm going to skip 0. I'm going to let you do 0, and I'm going to come down all the way here to 2. Y equals negative, and I'm going to do this, x plus 3. The only thing I'm erasing is the x. And now I'm not plugging in -2, I'm just plugging in 2. So remember what happens here. When you subtract a negative, you can make those one big plus sign. Okay, so now I've got to pay attention to same sign. Okay, they're both positives. And I'm only combining positives, so y equals 5 here. Okay, and I'm going to come down here to this one, and I'm noticing that I have different signs. And we know that different signs differ, so I've got to find the difference between these two. And my positive is bigger. I'm combining more positives, so it'll be a positive answer. And 3 minus 2 is 1. Okay, so I just discovered that when I plug in 2 for x, y equals 1. And I discovered that when I plug in -2 for x, that y equals 5. Okay, you get to do all of them in between. And the same goes here. So I will write this y equals not x over 2 plus 1, but you're going to plug in -4 there. You'll divide. Pay attention to same sign sum. Actually, we can do that right now. So instead of writing x, I'm writing -4. All right, I am dividing. So remember, when we multiply and divide, we use the triangle. A negative divided by a positive is a negative. So I've got -2 plus 1. Okay, that's multiplying and dividing. Now I'm adding and subtracting. And this is the 1, 2, 3 rolls. Okay, so 1, label. Number 2, circle. 2 is bigger than 1, so my answer is going to be negative. And different signs differ. 2 minus 1 is 1. So ready? When x equals -4, my y equals -1. Okay? And then when you graph these, I'm just going to graph the 2 of these answers. -2, 5. -2, 5 is starting at the origin, run -2, and jump +5. Okay, and then this is my other point, 2, 1, 2, 1. Run 2, jump 1. Okay, and then all of my other dots should be in between here. If they're not, then they're wrong. So that's a really great way to check. Okay, they should form a perfectly straight line. The next part of the test that I can go over, let's see. Let's go over this because we didn't do this in the functions packet review. Okay, so copy and complete the table of input pairs for the function rule. Y equals 3x plus 2. So here I've got y equals 3x plus 2. I'm going to rewrite that. Okay, we know that all of our inputs are x and all of our outputs are y, right? So these represent x, and if I know what x is, what am I going to do? Plug them in. So instead of writing x, and I'm multiplying 3 times x, I'm going to multiply 3 times 3. Okay, so 3 times 3 is 9, and drop everything else. And y equals 11. So when I plug in 3 for x, my y equals 11. Okay, and down here, these represent y, so I'm going to plug them in for the y this time, not the x. So I'll rewrite this, y equals 3x plus 2. So the only thing that's changing is y becomes, and I'll start with 35. And you know how to do this. You did this in the very first section in solving an inequality, a two-step inequality. You just subtract 2 minus 2, 33 equals 3x, divide by 3, and x equals 11 there. So when I plug in when my y is 35, my x is 11. Okay? And then down here we've got, so for number 4, y equals mx plus b. We're given the function rule right here. Okay, so obviously my h is y, right? So, and my w is x because this is the variable term. Okay, so this function rule relates to the height of a plant, h. So this is important that we know h is my height. After w weeks, w represents weeks, of growth. Make a table, okay, we know what a table looks like, right? X and y. Make a table to show the height. So what is the height? The height after 4, 33, and 98 weeks. And so these numbers represent the weeks, and we just realized that w is the weeks, right? And w is my x value. So w is my x, and my y, I can clearly tell that that's my h, my height. So I'm looking for the height after this many weeks. So I'm plugging in 4, plugging in 33, and I'm plugging in 98. And these are my x values. So I've got h equals, it's essentially the height is 7 inches plus 2 per week. But I've got these numbers to plug in for w. So I'm going to write this 3 different times. Once with 4 plugged in. I'm going to do it again with 33 plugged in, and I'm going to do it a third time with 98 plugged in. So I'll multiply and add that 7, multiply and add the 7, multiply and add the 7. So 2 times 4 is 8 plus 7. So my height is 15. So after 4 weeks, my height will be 15 inches. Okay, and you'll do that with all of those.